Thank you very much, Senator Dane. Senator Heitkamp.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman. This continues our discussion about what's happening and what we can do to improve conditions for Native American youth, an issue that everyone in this committee I know is extraordinarily passionate about. I was recently on the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation and spent some time visiting with people who work in human trafficking and certainly people who work with victims. And a young officer told me about how she knew a couple kids who would get in trouble just so they would have the stability of being incarcerated for a weekend, where they knew exactly, someone would actually listen to them, and then somebody would actually feed them and make sure that they were taken care of. That's a story that should break anyone's heart. And I know as we look at kind of improving conditions or improving the situation for incarceration, we know that this is a much bigger problem. We can't just keep Band-Aiding, kind of and isolating and siloing each one of these problems. We've got to look at it systemically. And so I'm interested, Professor, you obviously know that Congress is working very hard towards some kind of justice reforms. We hope juvenile justice reform will be part of that, whether it's drug courts or whether it's early interdiction or whether it is diversion programs that give kids a chance to still participate in society, because once they're marked, and that's true in felony communities too, but once they're marked, then that sets the course for the future. I'm wondering if you had 3 priorities, and I know you made a lot of suggestions in your testimony, but you want to give advice to some 4 senators here on what you would love to see in those reform packages. What 3 things would you recommend?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. There's obviously a lot that needs to be done, and it's difficult to pick a few. But some of the reforms can be done at the agency level, and some can be done at the tribal level, and some require congressional intervention. And so that's what I think it's important to highlight here. One is to get Native youth out of the federal system whenever possible. So that requires, what I think the easiest way to do that is an amendment to the Federal Juvenile Delinquency Act to require deference to tribal prosecutions before children are prosecuted in federal court. The second is get them out of state systems whenever possible. It's pretty clear that state and federal systems are not serving the youth well. And so that is a little trickier in terms of how to do that. It could be done through something like the Indian Child Welfare Act, extended to cover delinquency. It could be done through an amendment to Public Law 280 to require deference to tribal jurisdiction. In all of these cases, the tribes have concurrent jurisdiction, but that jurisdiction, there's no requirement that the other governments respect that jurisdiction or even ask the tribe what to do in an individual case. So sometimes it happens because individual prosecutors are trying to cooperate, but sometimes it doesn't. So getting kids out of the federal system, getting them out of the state system. And then the third piece is what's going on in the tribal system. So incarceration, as you mentioned, this sort of problem of relying on incarceration is not a problem that's unique to Indian country. It is a problem, it's a sickness that we have in the country as a whole, and it's not going to be easy to sort of move away from that. But tribes are actually better positioned than other governments. So what we've heard even in this testimony is that tribes have been saying for a long time, we don't want to lock up our kids, we'd like to do something else. And so what's needed is funding and agency level and congressional policy that supports tribes in their efforts to do that. So you are more likely to see, for example, someone who is in charge of a tribal juvenile system who's also related to the kids and knows something about what to do with them in the community, and supporting their efforts to come up with creative solutions to do that instead of building jails.
One of the things I will tell you that I think we fail on is we fail to screen kids very well who go into the system, whether it's fetal alcohol effects, whether it is trauma-induced behavior, non-consequential thinking, and just a fundamental disparity. How would you recommend that? What would you recommend that we screen for kids so that we have a better idea who's entering the system and how we can better divert or interdict earlier?
Yeah, so I know that there's tools being developed, for example, to screen kids coming into contact with the juvenile system for experience of trauma, for example. So I think you're absolutely right that screening is important both when they come into the system and earlier, right? So the earlier that we can identify things like mental health issues or substance abuse issues, these kids can be reached before they get into the system. But the other piece of that is that you can do all the screening in the world and you can do it well, but if you have nothing to do with those kids after you screen them, then you could find out that all of the kids, 90% of the kids, were suffering from mental health issues. But if there was nowhere to put them, it wouldn't matter that you screened them well.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important piece of it as well.
And Professor, if I can just have a moment, that's one of the reasons why I have a little concern about your first two suggestions. I think the tribes are strapped for resources. I think that they're just having a hard time meeting current demand, and to say, now you're going to take on this additional responsibility, to the extent kids are going to fall through the cracks, we need to be very, very cautious that along with that recommendation comes resources or comes programming that actually makes a difference. And if I can be just indulged a little bit, one of the things that I'm hearing frequently is that once kids are incarcerated in the federal system, they are not given educational opportunities. And so I'd like someone here on this panel to address that concern, because these are kids that have an opportunity during that period to actually progress and learn. But if they're simply warehoused, that is unconstitutional and it's inappropriate.
Senator Heitkamp, I can answer that question. And when we talk about federal facilities, I think we're also talking about federally funded tribal and BIA facilities. And so I can tell you that all of the program, and I've got a list of the 23 here, and it explains what level of education they get in there. Certainly the BIA facilities have education in there, and I would say 95. There may be an instance, I'd have to look and be very clear with you, to give you a 100% accurate answer, but I can tell you all of the BIA facilities have education in them. The issue that we've got a lot of times is, and this is no excuse. This is not I'm not saying that it's any less important, but a good number of the kids that we get coming through our facility are there for 3 or 4 days, and so it's very difficult to develop an individualized education plan for them. And but we do have a contract in place that's funded by BIA OJS and monitored by Bureau of Indian Education. We didn't feel like we necessarily had the expertise to ensure those things were being done right. We knew there was a responsibility to have it, but we wanted people who knew education to be overseeing that for us. That's how that's working.
Thank you very